Hello, everyone. Welcome to the LightSong School of 21st Century Shamanism and Energy Medicine podcast. My name is Sarah Marie. I am a council member and a member of the LightSong community since 2013. I have on the show with us today Amber Jane Arquette, also a council member. And how long have you been with LightSong, Amber Jane?
Two since spring of 2016.
Spring of 2016. Okay.
So we
So
were still having classes in Gresham.
that's right. We were still
Yeah.
doing everything in person. I remember having class with you. We were in level 3 together for one of our
hmm
classes. And I know that there were other ones that we were in person for. She has been a pivotal part of bringing the Light Song School onto its online platform. And so we are
hmm
forever grateful to her for that. And today she's sharing with us a story about those beginning times, the times when we were just starting to get to know who our allies were. She's going to share with us how she began her relationship with one of her most intimate beings. And I believe the story starts all the way back in level 1. Is that true?
Oh yeah, it was the first ally that I met. It was really profound. Um, just as a kind of caveat, I was just thinking. I was with yesterday. I was with a student who has done level 1 and is now like partway through her level 2 training. And I was thinking back to my level 1 experience and where she is, because she was kind of doing this um, just, where am I going, and like what's my progression? Where am I on the path? And looking back to my level 1, it's like I don't even think I could have imagined my life and my world as it is now. And I have come so dramatically far. Like it's been the most profound experience, or like set of years of my life, I feel like. So I just wanted to start with that. Um, that it's energy medicine and connecting to our guides and learning, the last talking stick, Karen said, it's our birthright to know how to journey to connect to these allies and guides and spirit animals who bring a love that is beyond like the human capacity. A love that brings you to tears, a love that makes you feel so incredibly safe, a love that makes you feel like you can't do any wrong. And they continue to show up for us in such big, huge ways.
Mhm.
And so there's this deep trust that unfolds because of that. And so, do you want me to just dive right into like my level 1 experience?
I actually want to comment really quick on what you
Okay.
just said
Yeah.
because I think that the the truth that it's our birthright to have access to our spiritual allies is moving on many different levels. And
Mhm.
you touched on, some of the emotional aspects of being in a relationship like this, the overwhelming love, the unconditional love. And I think another kind of piece of that is the sense of belonging that we have when we
Mm.
begin to work with our spiritual allies because we've been so cut off from the spiritual realms. It is literally like an aspect of community that we've been isolated from. And so
Mhm.
getting to know these spiritual beings brings us back into a sense of community that I think for some of us, we always knew we were missing, but didn't quite know how to find it or to say what we were looking for.
Mhm.
And so I,
Mhm.
I really appreciate your beginning our discussion with that feeling and
Mhm.
that sentiment because it is so much a really big facet of the experience here at Lightsong, which is getting to know who you are internally and then who you are in this larger context of your spiritual family.
Yeah. Yeah. And that reconnection piece, like, I think just to expand on that a little bit more, like before, I didn't feel like I had connection to my ancestors, which we've chatted about before in different places, and I think we'll chat more about. But also, like the Egyptian allies that came in for me, the galactic allies that came in for me, that connection that you're talking about was like, oh my gosh, I kind of knew that. Like I kind of had an affinity or a calling to a certain um, spiritual text or like even ritual or something like that. And now that I have these profound relationships, I mean, they are like people in my life. They are
Right.
certainly
Yes.
alive and talkative and interactive. Um, it is that like I have a sense of belonging. I'm not um thirsty as
Mhm.
much as I was before, where I was like, where do I find that connection? Where do I find that like validation and knowingness that yeah, this is a part of me. This is who I am.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love to start the story because I've shared it a couple times with the resistance because I think like just bringing to attention the resistance because a lot of time in some spiritual perspectives that if there's a lot of resistance, if there's a lot of blocks and challenges, then it means don't go that way. And it was like I had spent like probably the last 5 years of my life before level 1 realizing that sometimes resistance means that's exactly where I need to go. So I had a little bit of knowing that like okay, I just need to keep going. I just need to keep going. So I had like lost the address, started going to the totally wrong location, realized, there was just like all these things falling apart on my way of getting there. I woke up late. I didn't feel, ready. And got to the wrong place, realized I had to drive another 20 minutes and I was going to be an hour late. And I was like, oh my gosh, should I not go? Right. And there was this bigger push. There was this bigger voice inside of me that said, get there. Like, don't
Mhm.
care about like how just you need to get there. And level 1 had already been uh suggested for me, like a friend of mine recommended it for like a year and a half before I even got there. So I show up and I'm just like, sorry, like I'm showing up an hour late. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. And in walks Pamela, the teacher of level 2, and she is like glowing, it was like a spectacular person with all of herself, right? And merged with her allies and her teaching allies. And so, of course, she looks like this angel, just glowing, beautiful, bright. And I was like, oh my gosh. And she just hugs me and like brings me into the circle. And so a lot of profound things happened in just like the first 10 minutes, like seeing the light inside of Pamela, feeling that like, come sit, it doesn't matter, you arrived, like that's all okay. Um and then I sat next to a gentleman who was really involved with LightSong at the time and instantly started feeling this telepathic communication and started getting information from his body, just that like he connected to the fairies. And so he ended up being like the assistant for the class that was in my group most of the whole weekend. So I got to like feel this safety and camaraderie. And so I got to ask him things like, do you believe in telepathic abilities? And he's like, yeah, of course. That's what we are. And then I was like, do you talk to the fairies? And he's like, yes, I do. So it was just this constant validation of like, oh my gosh, these people do not think I'm nuts. Like they're talking about something that um, has been really real, but has been something that was so scary too and unknown. Like I didn't have a guide, I didn't have a teacher. So, Jan explains a lot about all the things in level 1 energy, how it works. She just brings language to a lot of things that I felt like I intuitively knew. And that's why I love that, light song in general, we talk about remembering. We're remembering. And so I was like, yes, yes, I am remembering, which is really honoring to that deep wisdom that people already hold.
Mhm.
So she sets us up for our first journey, and we're going to do a journey to meet our power animal. And we have these masks, and she's using the drum, and my body just responded to the drum so quickly. I felt like I just went into the spirit world so easily. And it felt beautiful, like the container, the safety, that high vibe energy was so significant that I didn't have any fear
Mm.
about spirituality or like the going into the spirit world, I guess. Which I would say before with my experiences of seeing dead people, of, just having paranormal experiences, the spirit world was really scary. So to have this significant different experience that like we're going to go into these benevolent places. So I
I
get
think,
so
can I?
I'm
I want to stop
yeah,
you right there. So you're
sure.
talking about how the difference, right from the beginning, it sounds like, is that the actual container, the space in which you were learning how to access these realms felt safe.
Mhm.
And I think that's significant because coming to training in this way, I think it could be easy to think about how vast the spiritual realms are and just how many different ways, historically a person has interacted or interfaced with the spirits, or coming to this class having been raised in a tradition or a faith or a belief system
Mm,
that villainizes the spiritual realms or highlights more dramatically the aspects of the spiritual realms that are more malevolent and harmful. And coming to the light song container for me as well, I really recognized and could feel palpably that this space was different, that this space was carefully curated in a way to make sure that only those spirits that were going to be helpful, compassionate,
yeah.
benevolent, that understood I was a student,
Yeah,
that
right?
understood that I needed to be met where I was at.
Mhm, mhm.
I intuitively felt that, and similarly felt safe enough to relax into the journey experience rather than feeling like I had to be on the lookout or watching my
Yeah,
back.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's really, um, different and, important and significant.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks, yeah. So, for me, this was one of the most profound meetings of my allies. I've had a couple other after this that, in my training where I've met a new ally, but meeting, this power animal was so profound. And I think I liked that you said that our allies meet us where we're at, but I would also like to say that sometimes if we're on the edge of our like comfort or like our consciousness, they sometimes just, just like push us a little bit further so that we'll have that amazing, like, moment.
Yes,
And so
that
I
is
feel
true.
like yeah, I feel like the thing that I received most out of this journey was, a dismemberment, which is the meaning of clearing so much stuff that kept me small, that kept me limited, that kept me in shame, that kept me negative and really unfree, you know? So I felt like I received a lot of healing in this.
Mhm.
So we go, she's drumming away. Jan is drumming on the drum, and I'm in total darkness. And she's guiding us down to the lower world, which is all benevolent beings. And I remember I kind of like plopped down into the earth and felt like I was in a different dimension. And I remember sitting in like lotus position in my mind in this journey. And I look around and I see all of these like wisps of white, like animal silhouettes in the darkness. And then every once in a while, like a horse would come sniff me or a cat would come sniff me. So and when they got close, I saw them like you would see in real life. And then something would brush against me. So it was like really active and I could feel and see a lot. Like I was sensing a ton. And so I kept asking, like Jan was guiding, "Are you my power animal? Are you my power animal?" And but I was also in awe of like, wow, look at all of these beings that are here, right? And it felt really good. And nobody was stepping forward, so I was just trying to be patient. And all of a sudden, I dropped to a even lower area. And in this area, everything was in focus. It was a dark earthen cave, and somehow reminded me of my childhood because I played in the dirt a lot. And I would actually create caves and have my friends like hang out in them like they were houses.
Oh.
Yeah, so it was, like, cool to be in this cave. I was, like, not scared of the cave, and I was like, "Wow, what animal lives in a cave?" And then I started walking and I heard this, like, clank, and I looked down and there's bones, like,
Mm.
piles and piles of human bones, like femurs and I was just like, "Whoa, okay, like, what power animal, like, eats people?" And so I was a little bit like, "Okay, where am I?" Like, I know this feels benevolent, but I'm also like, it's got my attention,
Mhm.
right? And so I'm looking around, and all of a sudden, all I can see is massive spider eyes, like these huge black globes. And I'm just like, right. And and I'm just like, "Oh my gosh." So the first thing that she tells me is she is like, "Look at the bones. I want you to," and she's commanding. It's no like fairy godmother this.
Mhm.
She's like, "I want you to look at these bones because I am the keeper of all of human history, of every single person's existence on this earth. I hold the records. I hold the respect and honor of their life." I mean, it was just like chills, 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 right?
Yeah.
And she goes on to talk more about how she shows up in the spirit world and how she shows up for humanity in this like really beautiful way that starts bringing tears to my eyes. And it also felt like an invitation of you have this too. You have this honor and respect for every single human life. It doesn't matter who they are, what they've done. And so I felt that kind of almost like sisterly, like, thank you for seeing me and thank you for doing this beautiful thing for us, that none of us are forgotten
Mhm.
or dismissed or unforgiven, right? So it just tapped into all of that big, beautiful things that we can only hope that the spirit world has in it. So then as she's telling me this story and all of a sudden she like lunges at me and eats me. And I start crying more, and I'm like, "Oh my god, I'm dying," I'm dying in the spirit world. And, um, and she's fierce. There was it wasn't all, rainbows and butterflies as we call it. It was this fierceness. It was this, "I need to shake you, I need to get your attention, and I need to break you open because you've been bound in all of these ways." And so I felt my body kind of like being pulled apart. And then I felt myself in her stomach. And it was the first time being a highly empathic, intuitive, telepathic, psychic person where everywhere I go, there is noise. There's some type of information coming to me. And so having peace and quiet is especially at that time like was not really heard of unless I was like backpacking out in the wilderness.
Mhm.
And I remember being in her belly, and there was an intense silence and an intense peacefulness. And it felt like almost that feeling I might imagine like coming back into my mother's womb, like that place where you are just so cared for. You don't have to think about anything else. And so she let me be there for a while and just feel into that. And now looking back at that experience, I think she was showing me that it's possible to learn so much about your gifts, how your energy systems work, and start to become more dominant and in control of your space,
Mhm.
taking up space, and shutting out the things that um, don't need, turning the volume down, shutting it out, having a break from all the rawness and openness.
She began teaching you right away.
Yeah, she did. Yeah.
Mm.
So she wasn't done with me yet. And so she like spits me out and she has like this little string of, spider web and she throws me into the abyss. And I've been to this abyss many times after this. It's part of her asking me to let things go and come back into my center and my pureness of my spirit and self. But at this time, I had never been thrown down in an abyss, and I was flailing and kind of, um, freaking out a little bit and crying. And in the real world, I'm laying on this carpeted floor, crying. Who knows what the assistants and Jan were thinking? Like, wow, she's having an experience in there, right? And and sh- and what I felt in that experience of being thrown into the abyss was like, again, that breaking open, that releasing, that I want you to let go of everything you think you know. That
Mm,
was like a big um, lesson for my first year of training. Let go of all the things you think you know and really come into what now I have the language for is like a curious mind. Um, you know,
mhm,
tapping into the realms of possibilities, like what else is there? That there's more than one answer, that there's a both and. So all of those, that was the beginning of a lot of those concepts. So eventually I get to a place where I feel um well, actually, I would say eventually I landed on this huge, beautiful spider web, silver, glistening, and we're out in the cosmos. And she comes and sits with me and she tells me this like beautiful story about interconnectedness, about unity, about
mm,
how we're all one and we're all connected and we're all an organism together and we're singular. And she talked about the web. So it was like really just beautiful. And again, made me cry because of that belonging piece that we just talked about was like, "Ah, yes, I love humanity. Like I'm here to be a part of help us, love each other and love ourselves and create something amazing because I know that we're capable of it." So um so she sat with me for a while and just kind of let me tap into those kind of concepts that just expand your consciousness, that don't put all the pieces together, right? Because it's not linear, but it really just expanded and validated some of the things that I had already known or grown up with the belief. And so coming back, Jan's calling us back with the calling of the drum and asking us to come out of the journey. And it takes me a minute, right? And I'm still like crying. And they bring us in groups. And of course, that gentleman that was in the class, like he's in my group. So it feels really safe again. And I have to sit there and bawl. And I just sit and I cry and I'm like, I'm okay, but I need to still be releasing um, all of this heaviness that I've been carrying, all of this loneliness I had been carrying, and just allow all of that love and all of those big concepts and that beauty into my heart and feel this like, wow, this is the magnificent being that I get to be in relationship with.
mm.
So, they explained to me that being eaten and torn apart by your power animal is a great blessing, and like everybody was clapping. There was only one other person in our class who also got devoured by her power animal. And so that felt really special too. It's like, wow, here's like this a big initiation for me.
Yeah, she came in with a bang.
Yeah,
She
she
really
did.
did. And I think that speaks to your readiness, though. I think
Mhm,
that speaks to where you were at. You were coming in really seeking and longing and wanting something to be different or wanting to know more. And
mhm.
again, I really believe that these power animals meet us where we're at. And so she she took the opportunity
Yeah. Yeah.
and she gave you all the things. So I'm
Yeah.
so curious. So that was in 2013. It's now 2022. How
2016.
2016,
Yeah.
2013,
Yes.
2016. How would you say your relationship with being with this person, this entity has developed over time, right? Because we're
Mhm.
given tools and ways to engage our spirit animals from the beginning, and then I feel like the relationship evolves. And so I'm curious, what feels different now than how it felt in that beginning place?
Mm. Yeah, well, I think with, our human relationships, we go through seasons and phases. Um, I would say that she has, and I also have noticed through listening to other students' stories and colleagues and all of that and your experiences that you share with me, is that we do have different relationships with the different allies in our lives. So like when we gained the teacher ally, my teacher never speaks to me, right? There's no teachings. So my power animal, I call her grandmother spider a lot of the time. She came to me and said, "I'll be your teacher. Like, I will teach you the things. I have lots of words. I have lots of wisdom." So right away, her and like, I would always go to her for everything. I would call on her for everything. So just building that relationship of what else can we do together? How can you help me? Um, how do I call on you? How do I honor you and say thank you? Um, so I think the difference between how the relationship was when it started, I will say that for a long time, when we got assignments to do journeys, I would go into the journey and right away I'd get a dismemberment, which is like, a clearing and a healing. So it was almost like, okay, I'll try to do the homework, but I'm just going to get in there and they're going to tear me apart again, and be like, stop, or not stop believing it, or I want to change that. It was more like you have been holding on to all of these energies and beliefs that aren't actually yours.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the truth of you. So, like, let's tear off the layers and get to the truth of you and then cultivate that and bring more of that out. And so there was a lot of process of her kind of doing that over and over and then teaching and doing that over and over. So for me, there was an intensity um of being in relationship with her. And then now it feels like we're just always around. It's almost like it's hard to feel her in such contrast anymore because I feel like we're just always in relationship together. We go everywhere together. We, journey to everywhere. And I would say that at times it's almost like she's like, "You got this. I'm
Mm-hmm.
here doing all the things that you know that I do, and you got the rest of it. So you don't have to pay attention to me anymore." Right? In this way of like, she's doing it. And I can feel her doing it in the background. Um, and I would say that she's also allowing other teachers to come in the last couple of years. She's been kind of like, go to them, like, see what they have. So there is this very realness to the relationship. It's not all etherical or prophetic or, um,
I think what I'm hearing you say is like there's an actual back and forth and exchange
mhm,
and there's conversation and there's aspects of it that are like the evolution of a human to human relationship where
yeah,
there's that really intense like getting to know each other period, and it's the honeymoon period, and then you're doing the hard work of figuring out how to you know jive with each other, and then you kind of reach this plateau of kind of being in harmony and rhythm with each other, and so
mhm,
there's a bit more of an integration of
mhm,
them with you and you with them, um,
mhm,
and I'm curious when you say that she kind of is pointing you to other teachers and other places to go and learn. Is that an ordinary reality, or is that other beings in the spiritual realms that she's pointing you to, or
Ooh,
both?
that's a good question, right? Because sometimes uh spirit will guide us to other people, and it doesn't seem like it's coming from a direct place. It's more of an intuitive or energy reading thing. I will say that a few other teachers have come into my training. I have woven them into my training, so it hasn't just been solely light song.
Hmm.
Um, but I would say that right now, especially in the last, yeah, I would say in the last year and a half, she was asking me to learn from Isis a little bit, more like spend more time with Isis. Um, and then there were a couple other allies and working with the North, which is something,
Yeah.
working with part of the medicine wheel. So it was like, it was almost like she wanted me to become almost interdependent
Yeah.
instead of this like codependent relationship on one spiritual relationship, which is kind of an interesting concept to even for me to think about.
I like it because how I'm kind of reading what you're saying is that she was the starting point for your spiritual bandwidth to begin. And then as you
Mm-hmm.
got to know her and you grew and evolved alongside of her, your bandwidth has now expanded to be able to include more than just her. And it feels like
Yeah.
that's kind of the point, has been the point the whole time, is
Mm-hmm.
to be ever evolving you. You know, we talk about in Lightsong that we're ever emerging. And your emergence is including more than just her. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's beautiful because it, you know, again, it speaks to what we mentioned earlier in our conversation, which is the light song experience gives you that really profound sense of belonging in a larger community. And community is more than just one guide, right? We
Mm-hmm.
get a whole team and entourage of spirits as we move through the light song curriculum. And I just think it's so lovely how your relationship with Spider really prepared you well to be able to do that in a good way. I just feel like she really set you up for success
Yeah.
to
Thank
be able
you.
to engage life um,
Mhm.
in a way that felt good, challenging for sure, but also gave you what you needed to do it well. And it wasn't always her doing the things, right? She was guiding you and showing you how to find within yourself the things that needed to be accessed so that you could interface with whatever was happening
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
in your
Mhm.
own power.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I wanna mention, is that so now I have an affinity with spiders. I love them. I carry them out of my house. I see them in the forest, there's not a lot of fear, except for, like, when they crawl on me, of course, I don't wanna be bitten because there's the, you know, realness of the spiders. Um, Which I would say is so beautiful and profound and what totally happens across the board with, I think, any student that meets their power animal, is that then they start seeing them in the real world. And, I remember when my daughter was, like, 3 years old and we were out in the sandbox, and I had never ever seen this spider before, and it jumped onto the chair, the arm of the chair, and it was this beautiful, and now I've seen them a few times, but it was this beautiful black fuzzy jumping spider with this white on its back. And I swear for a few moments, like 5 minutes, we were eye contact, like talking to each other. And so I just felt so loved every time that I see these spiders. Before, when I was younger, I used to have dreams that I would be in the bathroom of my house, and all of a sudden, out of the drain would become all these spiders, and all the walls and the ceiling and the whole house would be covered with spiders, like you couldn't go anywhere without touching the spiders. So I had multiple dreams of spiders and even other insects like coming, like enveloping me basically, like not being able to get away from them. So it was really, like, validating that, "Oh, okay." Oh, it's kind of that moment of like, "Of course." They've
This
been
is
talking to me
why.
my whole life. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm, that
And
often happens, yeah, in level 1 where the power animal that shows up for us is an animal that we have been, had an affinity for most of our
Mhm.
lives.
Or a fear of, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Because, there's a lot of power in this relationship. And, as you've kind of heard, I mean, I have a lot of joy in the experience, but it was intense. It wasn't, a soft, you
Right.
know,
And I so appreciate that you're
romance.
presencing that part of it. And you've framed it in such a lovely way of saying that, our spirits will take us to the edge. They'll take us to the edge of
Mhm,
our growth.
mhm.
And that they'll give us experiences that kind of push us a little far further than where we are. And in the moment, it can be uncomfortable, but once we're on the other side of it, we're so grateful, and we are absolutely able
Yeah.
to, perceive that this push, this encouragement to go beyond where we are is such an act of love,
Mhm.
truly an act of love.
And I would even say too, to get really specific about this, is that sometimes my allies have got me to a place where I'm scared. Like it's
Mhm.
shocking and I'm feeling fear. And when I notice, and this why I'm using my hands here, is that my energy kind of opens up and they
Mhm.
can get in. Because otherwise I'm so tight. I'm not letting anything in. But when I kind of freak out, I open my even just for a minute. And we use this, you and I have used this in healing sessions, and we're guided to like do light drumming and then slam
Bang
on the
it.
drum
Yeah.
or like, and in level 2, we learn how to like spit on our, spin. I've never done that
Yeah.
to a client, but
Well, I think what you're doing
yeah.
now is in a lovely way weaving the energy medicine component of our curriculum at Lightsong
Mhm,
into the shamanic aspect of it, and vice versa, the shamanic into the energy medicine. At this point, it's hard for me to distinguish the difference because we do so much of those two. I'll say concepts we work alongside of together all of the time, but
mhm,
our spirit animals, our allies, are truly working with our energy system, the energy matrix of who we are.
mhm.
And it's depending on how our energy matrix is made up, they will use an energy that is going to, cause the response or cause the reaction that we're looking for. And it's not always the one that we think we're wanting or the thing that we need,
Yeah,
but it's the one that's the most effective. And so
yeah,
being in that trust place that no matter what is showing up in the context of your communicating with your animal, that what's showing up is the thing that you need in the moment.
mhm,
Being
mhm,
able to look past, this doesn't feel good or this is uncomfortable, this feels like it's the opposite of what I'm looking for. Having the knowingness that because you are asking for change and this is happening in the context of that request, that
mhm,
this is actually showing up for me in a good way, and I
mhm.
can trust that how this is going to unfold in the way that I was hoping for, or in a way that is beyond our wildest imaginations, right? Like we're always asking
Yeah,
for this or something greater.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautifully said. Totally. And I think that, that trust of like, I'm willing to go a little bit further, even though this is uncomfortable, because I trust in this relationship. And I think that when you build that trust, and it doesn't take very long, right? I don't know about you, but it's pretty like,
My heart melted right away.
yeah, yeah, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I love you.
There
Like,
was a
I
sense of,
love you.
yeah, there was a soul recognition and feeling like, my allies, most of the allies that I have right now came to me in ways that made me realize that I had always felt them, like out here, and known that they
Mhm,
were there. And so when I created the space to allow for there to actually be an introduction and a meeting, it was
mhm,
absolutely the feeling of reunion and coming back into, a community that I, for whatever reason, was veiled
mhm.
from, and now I can see.
Yeah, yeah. I would say just really quick here because, um, I was just talking to somebody about the both and of that saying, like, everything happens for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And we were like, both and, like, yes, and not always. Some stuff is just showing up. But in that both and, I love what you're saying about, like, yes, keep trusting the words that you brought to um pushing through the discomfort, because I think we're taught so often to move away from the discomfort
Mm-hmm.
and not trust the discomfort. Um, and we can always ask for more grace and ease. We can always ask for like the intensity level to drop ten notches.
Sure.
Um, but I think when we really can distinguish, and that's what I think, you know, having allies, connecting to our spirit world, connecting even more clearly to our higher consciousness, building up our energy potency and our spirit soul
Mm-hmm.
wholeness, that we have a greater ability to distinguish what's good for me
Mm-hmm.
discomfort and what is actually harmful to me discomfort. And um and so I just so appreciate, like, the again, back to these relationships, that if I'm unsure, I have someone I can trust to ask, and we can yeah, and just that I think that so often we run from the scary things
Mm-hmm.
because that it's in our storytelling, it's in our fairy tales.
It is. But and I really quick want to touch on something you just said about how essentially what you're saying is that our relationships with these spirit allies um, help us orient ourselves in the chaos of all that's happening all around us, so much so that we're able to determine and discern, like, this is a medicine for me, this is a medicine for someone else.
Mhm,
This is something that I can welcome in, this is something that I can ask to go.
mhm.
And how they do that, I think a really lovely way that you've described that is they give us a reference point to operate from.
Mhm,
We
mhm.
learn how to, I mean, right away, you were merged with your power animal. She consumed you when you were in her belly, and you felt that stillness and you felt that quiet. And
Mhm.
so you were able to feel your own energy, possibly for the first time since you were in this body.
Yeah, it did definitely feel like
And
that.
so it's there are very almost methodical ways that they teach our own energy to have a memory, an imprint, a reference point for what neutrality is, so that
Mhm.
we can filter everything else through that or against that. And I
Yeah.
think that that's perhaps, and this might be a conversation for another time, but
Yeah,
perhaps
yeah.
where we're going is to that place of neutrality, so that we're not filtering things only through our stories, but
Mm.
we're allowing ourselves to have an experience from that place of neutrality, so that we're not um, already creating a response or a reaction that is like operating like a program for us. We're allowing for something different to happen, a different dynamic to exist. And in that way, I
Yeah.
think that we grow and that we evolve and we change. So
Yeah.
well, thank
Well,
you
this
so
has
much,
just been
Amber. Go
yeah.
ahead. I was
I
gonna
was
say
just
thank you
gonna
so
say this has
much.
been like a yeah, beautiful conversation. Yeah, I'm excited for the people who want to enter level 1 and want to enter this relationship, and to just explore, because it's so fascinating, especially for the spiritually curious and the people who have been feeling like, I just need some bearings in my life. I need some dose of, like, who am I,
Right.
and who is available, or who is around me to love me, care for me, and look out for me, and that's real.
Who is around me that can love me and care for me, and that that's real? I love, we learn skill, we learn technique, and then we also are introduced to this larger community, and that sense of belonging, and that, in a very real sense is just as life-changing as it is to learn the technique. So thank you so much for presencing that and so beautifully telling us your story.
Thank you. my sweet friend.
Till next time, my friend.
Yep. Bye.